illusion that everybody is easy for my husband. When he says I'm very easy to live with, then I know that anybody is easy for him.
I've met a few people who weren't very easy. Well, now we'd like to share with you a little bit about the work that took place in a place that no longer exists. It's called Mountain Missionary Institute.
And Scott, I might also say that, you know, our greatest trials are really our greatest blessings. It doesn't seem like it at the time, but when we look back, we realize that they really are our greatest blessings.
As a boy growing up, let me put this in or I'll put it in wrong. As a boy growing up, I read stories about pioneers who went to different parts of the world, and the impression that was given to me is that all the pioneering work was over. And I thought, oh no, I wish I had been born a long time ago so that I could get a chance to pioneer. Well, the two institutions we told you about last night, when we arrived, there was already something going there, but Mountain Missionary was our first chance. We were the first family to arrive, and so this gave us the real opportunity that I had longed for to pioneer a brand new place from the beginning. Now, a little background before we talk about what happened there. This was not supposed to be where I was the leader. This opportunity was discovered by a physician from the New England Sanitarium and Hospital, and he had reported it to Wildwood because he thought that Wildwood could do something about it. And so they discussed the idea of establishing a project there. It had been a school in the past, two different schools, and so it had two dormitories. It had a large home on it that was called a mansion. It had a gymnasium on it and a couple of other houses. So it was a campus already established. But the owners of it had gotten to the place where they couldn't use it anymore, so they were selling it. And so I went with one of the groups up there to look it over, and it was really, had real possibilities. And so Wildwood decided to put together a group to go up there and establish the institution. John Jensen was supposed to be the leader. It was called to be an industrial school in the East. And so I was excited. We were going to have that project besides ours. Ours was in Massachusetts. This one would be in New Hampshire. But after things had been rolling along quite a ways, Brother Jensen said, no, I don't think the Lord is calling me to do it. So then Warren Wilson was kind of stumped. He didn't know what to do. And so as it turned out, they ended up asking me to do it. And so, we began to look at the actual moving forward to get the property. The real estate agent had shown it one time when a large group of us had been there, but the rest of the time we had always gone to Antioch College, who was the owner of the property. And so when it came time to buy it, Antioch didn't say we had to go to the real estate, so we started negotiating with Antioch College. And all of a sudden, the real estate learned from somebody that, oh, you showed this property one time. And so they came along with their handout to collect their commission, which was going to be about $12,000. And Warren Wilson and the group at Wildwood said, that's it, we're done with it, we're not going to do it. But I had seen so much of God's providence in this, I said, we can't let it go. God must have an answer to this. So I went to Antioch College and I explained the situation. And I asked them, would you be willing to pay $4,000 of the commission of the real estate agent? And they said, yes, we would. And so then I went to the real estate agent and I explained the whole situation to them. And I said, would you be willing to drop your commission by $4,000? And they said, yes, we would. So then I went to Wildwood and I said, are you willing to move forward with this property if you only have to pay $4,000? And they said, yes, we will. So we were able to move forward. Now, the money to purchase it, it was in a sense, there were 3 different pieces of property, and they all had to be bought at the same time. The main part of the property was the school, but there was a house that they had sold off, and that house could see the campus, so we didn't want somebody else having that. And also there was acreage around it. I think it was over 100 acres. I forget how much, 150 maybe. And all of those things had to be purchased at the same time. But God opened the door for every one of those purchases to work at the same time, and the property was purchased. Now, where did the money come from? Well, Wildwood had done some fundraising. They had sent out a newsletter talking about this industrial school in the east. And some money had come in. I don't remember how much, 20, 25,000 maybe. But the thing that really convinced us that God was in this thing, one day, a phone call came to Elder Frazie's office. Now, at that time, Elder Frazie was gone a lot. He was being used by the church to preach on the sanctuary and to combat the Brinsmeadism that had made inroads into the Adventist church. And so he wasn't home that much of the time. He was no longer serving as the president here. That had been turned over to Warren Wilson. And so he could be gone as much as need be. Well, he just arrived home from a trip, had just walked into the office, and the phone rang. And it was a person who really loved Elder Frazie. He was a farmer out in the West. And he had made a decision in his own heart. He read about the school in the East that they were thinking of starting, and he decided in his own mind, if I call Wildwood and I get Elder Frazie, I will give $100,000 toward the purchase of this property. And so the Lord arranged it that he was home at the very moment. Not even a secretary answered the phone. Elder Frazie picked it up, and the man gave the $100,000. Now, I think the total price was like $175,000, and I don't remember where the rest came from, but the Lord raised all the money to purchase this property. By that time, I had no question but what the Lord was in it. Wildwood also was very generous with us. They gave us $10,000, and they said, that's all we can do for you. You're on your own. $10,000. But the property was paid for, which is a huge asset. I feel sorry for people trying to start institutions when they still have to pay for the property. But the best time to get the money for the property is before you start. Well, Wildwood had already worked out a business that they thought was going to pay the bill for it, and that was to be run by Philip Bofink, who was a person that had worked at the Review and Herald for quite a time, had a lot of experience. There was an English book that Warren Wilson's daughter had put together, and they thought, we're going to print this book and sell this book, and it's going to support Mountain Missionary. But after a short while of being there, we found out it wasn't going to support Mountain Missionary at all. But the Lord sent a young man, Daniel Dreher, who had worked in the shearling business, and he was interested in setting up a business to make hats, gloves, and slippers out of sheepskin. Now today that'd probably get a lot of people angry, but back then it was popular, and yet that business didn't really amount to too much. I mean, it was successful. We were able to be in the black with that business, but it wasn't enough to really support the institution because we grew very fast. Since we had lots of space for people, within 6 months we had 90 people there, including students and workers. And so we fairly quickly realized you're going to have to do something besides this.
$10,000 does not last very long.
No, it doesn't. And so I forget exactly, hopefully my wife might remember, what prompted us to think about the wholesale food business.
Well, I think at the time that Oak Haven was doing very well, and there were some folks working in New York City, and they were doing well. And so we thought, well, you know, we have to do something. We have to be able to support ourselves. And so we talked about getting into wholesale food business, and we talked with both of these entities, and they both discouraged us. They said, no, that's not what you want to do. It's a lot of work. And it's like, well, it's fine for you guys to say that, but we're sitting up here, and there's no money, and we've got a lot of people to take care of. And so we decided that we would venture out with a wholesale food business. And it was kind of interesting. One of our first trips that we made down to New York City, we had an old step van, and so on the way down to New York City, one of the windows fell out, and it was really cold, and we had our kids with us, and it was late at night, and I said to my husband, can't we just take a motel for the night? And he looked at me and said, honey, you want to blow our whole life savings in one night? I said, no, it's okay, it's okay.
That was literal, not figurative. We didn't have any savings. We'd been pioneering for several years already, and we were headed into more pioneering.
And really, and even in those years, you know, our food allowance and our stipends were very small. I mean, if you want to figure it on a ratio of today's economy, you could multiply it by 3.5 or 4, but we got like $10 a month for a stipend. We got $15 for food for adults and $11 for kids. And that's basically what we lived on. And after, it was a little bit maybe into the second year, our treasurer was gone because his in-laws were very sick and dying, and he was gone for like 5 months. So we went 5 months with no stipend and no food budget.
And
but we never went hungry. God is good.
And even when the treasurer was there, they were not always able to pay. If I remember right, we got only stipends half of the time and food budget half of the time. So it actually was half of that if you put it on a monthly basis. Well, some interesting things happened. My wife mentioned the carrots last night. There was another providence, just about the time we were moving from down at Lithia to New Hampshire to Mountain Missionary. There was a man who was kind of an alcoholic, and he saw that he had an orchard of apples, but he wasn't going to be able to pick them. So he offered to us to pick them on shares. In other words, half of the apples belong to you, and you can use them or sell them, and you give me the other half of the apples. So we took him up on it, and I got my first experience selling things other than books. I had sold books before. And so I would go to fruit stands and sell apples, and we had all the apples we could eat. We made applesauce, and my wife came up with what?
Oh, every way you could use apples, the same as every way you could use carrots.
That's where she first started making apple pizza. We still like that today. And, the whole campus had plenty of apples to eat, even if they didn't have everything else.
Brother Atherton used to say he thought that applesauce would come out of our veins.
Another interesting happened about our gardens. Of course, we recognized if you want to eat, you better grow a garden. So we put in a garden right away. And my wife's going to tell you about one of the things in the garden.
Well, several things about gardening up north, and only those that had lived up there know. Have you ever driven up in the north and you see all these rock walls everywhere? Well, those rocks came from somewhere, and most of them came out of the ground where we were going to garden. So gardening was not easy up there. I mean, there were rocks and rocks and rocks, and we would bring them in wheelbarrow loads and put them in the front yard. And I told my husband, I swore by the next year they had worked their way back to the garden because there was always more rocks. But that first year, we had moved there, I think the end of June, but we knew that planting a garden and having food was essential. And so it was the first thing we did. And people came up there and visited. We planted quite a bit of corn, and people came up there and visited, and they just shook their head and said, you wasted your time. The corn didn't grow any higher than, maybe this high, huh?
Yeah.
It was really, really short corn stalks. And they said, you wasted your time. You won't get anything off of those. But with God, all things are possible. And those little short stalks had huge ears of corn on them. We probably had the best crop of corn we ever had.
Going back to the business, with that step van, we were able to purchase about $5,000 worth of food. And when we got back, we typed up a sheet and had 13 items for sale. We were competing against multi-million-dollar businesses who had been in business for a long time. And I started going around to health food stores and showing them my list of 13 items. Well, they started buying. And in fact, they started really liking us. And guess who was in that, right? God. And because of his blessing, within a year's time, we were selling $100,000 worth of food every month. And we were growing by, leaps and bounds. And the Lord blessed that business so well that it was able to support the entire institution, except for the little bit that the other business supported. Well, that meant that we had the burden not only of running the institution, but of trying to earn the money for the institution. And that...
Which is not a good idea.
No, it's not a good idea, but when you're pioneering, sometimes you have to do things that are not the ideal. Well, as a result of that, the business became all-consuming, and my wife was the office person, and she, made the calls, did the purchasing, and so on. And and I did the warehouse work because I couldn't afford to do the deliveries and be away from the institution. And I remember one day as I was working in the warehouse, which meant unloading trucks and loading trucks and moving bags and boxes from here to there, I started thinking, what's the great work that you're supposed to be doing? And it was like the Lord spoke to me and said, Moses herded sheep, you're herding boxes and bags. And so I realized that he had a purpose in my doing all this mundane work to help support the institution. Now I got to do other things, teach some classes and, do things that a president would do.
It was kind of interesting because we had made the warehouse, the gymnasium that was there, we had turned it into a warehouse. And so one of the guys that we did business with, I talked to him quite often on the phone, and he dealt with Wilbur also. And so whenever he would call and ask if Wilbur was there, I would tell him, oh, he's down at the gym. Because that's just what we referred to it as. We referred to it as the gym. And this guy came out to the institution one day, and he saw what the gym was. And he said, all these times that you were telling me he was down at the gym, I figured he had to be the healthiest guy around because he lived at the gym.
Well, he was right on the healthy part, I guess. But I did do it to excess, unfortunately. Another experience when he did visit out there, when he came on the campus, he found the treasurer, which was Herb Atherton. And Herb Atherton brought him down to the gym. And so Herb introduced me as the president of Mountain Missionary Institute. And the man looked at me, and he looked at him, and you could just read his face. He was saying, you're joking me. Because I was in work clothes, and I was working sweeping at the time when he came, and he thought, no president's going to do that. And so it took a while to convince him that I was the president of the institution. Well, we need to hurry due to time. I am not a good fundraiser, and so the Lord has always had to help me by touching somebody's heart. And that's what happened up there at Mountain Missionary. There was an Adventist man who was running a printing company in Taunton, Mass. And somehow we came in touch with him, and he became interested in the work that we were doing up there. And we had quite a bit of contact with him. I learned he was a humble man. He made a lot of money, but he lived in a simple house, and he didn't, lavish himself like so many people do. He was just a very humble man, and he was so impressed with what was going on there. I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands he gave at different times when they were needed to expand or to do this or that, but what a blessing it was in helping us to get on our feet up there. As time went on, we found it necessary to come to Wildwood for the constituency meeting and board. I've been on the constituency and board for not all the 50 years, but pretty close to it. Yeah, maybe 48. And so we'd come down. Well, we didn't really have a vehicle to come down with, so there was a family there that was willing to sell an old Ford van to us for $100. Now you can imagine how good that was for $100. We discovered on the trip that it burned a quart of oil for every 100 miles. And so when we arrived at Wildwood, fortunately, the van did get us here. And we spent a little time, I guess, was that the time when the dental work got done? I'm not sure, but
No. Mm-mm.
Anyway, we were here for constituency and for some other things. And so when we got ready to go back home again, at that time, Dr. Hansen was here, and he informed us that Wildwood had decided to give us a practically brand new Ford van. And the reason was there was a lady by the name of Joan Herman who had been in an iron lung in the hospital for quite some time, but she had passed away. And so they didn't really know what to do about the van, who to give it to, and they decided, well, we're going to give it to Mountain Missionary. So they said, we're going to take your old van and we're going to give you this new one. We couldn't hardly believe it. But you know why we needed it? That was the first delivery vehicle for our wholesale food business. And we wore it out. We put 100,000 miles on that van, delivering food until it got too small and we had to get bigger vehicles to make the deliveries with. A couple of other quick things. We also felt like starting a bakery would be good to go along with the wholesale food business. And we had space still in the gymnasium to put a bakery in. So right about the time that we were thinking about starting a bakery, someone sent $5,000 in the mail to be used however we thought it best. And so the Lord helped us to see, well, that's your seed money to start the bakery. So we looked around and we were able to buy all of the equipment that it would take to run a bakery except one thing, and that was the oven. So we went ahead and we purchased all the other things that we needed, the bread slicers and the mixers and everything we needed. And just shortly after that, I was talking with Ron Carreri, who was at that time president of Oak Haven, and he was just asking me how things were going, and I shared with him a report. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, "Is there anything we can do for you?" I said, "Well, no, unless you have an oven." He said, "I do, I have an oven." And he said, "I'll put it on the truck and send it to you next time the truck comes." And so now we had the bakery, and God had provided a young lady. Some of you know Rosalie Hurd and her husband, Frank. Their daughter was with us at that time. And so she became the baker for the bakery, and the business really prospered as well under her leadership. Some later people took over the bakery and almost killed it, but she really did an excellent job. Another wonderful experience we had was to be involved. At that time, the conference assigned us a pastor. We did have a church on the campus, but the pastor was assigned by the conference. And the first one was pretty good, but after that, it sometimes was a problem to have someone that didn't understand self-supporting work. So we visited the Washington, New Hampshire church. If you know anything about history, this was the first Adventist church, and at the time we went there, it was used for special events. In other words, groups would come in, busloads of people, and they would hold a Sabbath program there. But the rest of the time, they had a local church, and it was only 4 people. And so I thought, well, this is a disgrace to have the First Adventist Church only 4 people. We need to do something about this. And so we took an interest in it. I think it grew up to about 30 people. So that brought a lot of joy. It's kind of fell back after we left into not active, but anyway, we had a great enjoyment. There was also another town not far away where it was called Peterborough, and there was no Adventist church there. So we formed a little group, and we were able to get that developed. That's where we came in touch with the Aho family, some of which have been in self-supporting work, and some of them even joined self-supporting work out of it. And so that was a blessing as well. Then I found that other people didn't want to work like I did. And instead of saying, okay, Lord, we can't do any more because we don't have enough help, my philosophy was, all this work needs to be done, and there's nobody else to do it, so you need to do it. And I would stay up sometimes, most of the night, frequently. I didn't realize I was burning out. I should have, but when I was at Wildwood, I didn't really get a lot of health classes. And so I didn't really realize on Sabbath, for instance, after I preached my sermon, ate dinner, I collapsed on the bed. I couldn't hardly get out the bed the rest of the afternoon. I was just wiped out. Sunday morning, I had energy again to go, and I'd go a whole nother week. Well, I don't know how long that went on, but finally, I had a physical collapse.
And I mean physical collapse. We honestly didn't think he was going to live. He hadn't actually slept in the bed for 4 months. He would sleep at night sitting on the floor leaning over a chair because of his asthma, and he couldn't breathe. And it was one of the most scary experiences I ever went through in my life.
So it was necessary after some, checking with the people that were there, it was necessary for me to fly down to Wildwood. I didn't want to go to a local hospital. I wanted to be here at this hospital.
Actually, we went to Uchee Pines first. Right?
Well, that's right, we did.
We went to Uchee Pines, and we were there for a couple of weeks, and he was doing really, really good. I mean, really good. And so we thought, okay, he's well enough to go home. He won't get involved in the work. And so we came back to Mountain Missionary, and honestly, he didn't get involved in the work. I think it was just the stress of being there with it all around him and not being able to do anything. And so it wasn't very long before he just started going down again, and that was really, really bad. That's when we came to Wildwood.
Yeah, the last incident that convinced us I needed to go to Wildwood is that my blood pressure started dropping very low, and I thought I was going to die. That's the way I felt.
And he looked like he was going to die. We had a little confrontation with our daughter that night, and I had gone to bed. It was about midnight. And I was falling asleep, and I heard him calling me, but I wasn't sure it took me a while to realize he was actually calling me. And I said, okay, what's the matter? And he said, I really don't feel good. And I hopped out of bed and turned the light on. And he was as white as my shirt. And he had sweat just pouring off of him, dripping. And I said, what's the matter? He said, I think it's my heart. And I took his pulse, and it was just going boom, boom. I mean, slow, slow, slow. And so there was a guy on campus, and we called him. And we had to wake up neighbors to get him because phones weren't we didn't have cell phones in those days. And so it was like 20 minutes maybe before he got there, and it seemed like 2 hours. But by the time he got there, Wilbur was doing a little bit better.
So it was decided, in fact, I couldn't even walk out to the car, so they had to carry me out in a chair.
He had gotten so bad he couldn't even get up and walk to the restroom. He had lost so much weight. He really honestly looked like he was going to die. We had an anointing service, and after that anointing service, he said he felt at perfect peace, that if he was to die, it was okay with him. And I was in total panic. I went, wait a minute, I can't raise 3 kids by myself. And it was a very scary experience.
But it was very interesting what the Lord did. From the moment that I arrived at the plane.
No, from the moment he got in the van. We carried him down the stairs, because we had to go. I didn't go with him. I told him, honey, it is no point, because he had several of these minor attacks, and I was under so much pressure with running the business and the kids and the students and everything. I said, it's not going to be any good for me to go with you, because I'm just too nervous and too stressed. I'm not going to help you. So there was one of the other guys who had a lot of medical experience from the institution that went with him. And from the moment he got in the van, it was a 2-hour drive to Hartford, but he could breathe. He felt pretty good until they got to airport. At 2 o'clock in the morning, they got to Chattanooga Airport, and Dr. Hanson was there to meet them. And his breathing didn't start closing in on him until they were almost here to Wildwood. And as soon as he got here, they started IVs and everything. And then, from that experience, that was a year before he recovered.
Yeah,
so we wouldn't recommend doing that.
My philosophy changed, and we'll end with this for today, for now, until 6 o'clock. We'll pick it up the story. My philosophy changed, and after this, I didn't make people as happy, but my philosophy was, Lord, this is all I can do. If you want more done, you send somebody to help me. And many times I saw that the Lord did send somebody to help me because I couldn't do it all. And that was very important. It has prolonged my life many more years. In fact, I never dreamed I would be the age I am now. I expected, due to the abuse that I had done to myself, that I would not still be here. But God is good, and we're still here doing what we can to advance God's work.